Hi, I'm Jeff Carter. I serve as president of Bethany Theological Seminary and the president of the Richmond Symphony Orchestra Board. Today with me is Jacob Joyce, a candidate for music director and conductor of the RSO. Jacob, wonderful to have you with us here on stage, which is exciting. I just want to learn a little bit about you as we move through this process. And the first question that I have for you is, why the position of music director and conductor of the RSO? What interests you in this position?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. It's been a delight to be here in Richmond. I worked for a few years in Indianapolis, just down the road, and so I knew of the Richmond Symphony for a while, and several of the musicians who play in the orchestra are people I've known in the past, and so, I've heard great things about this community and about the orchestra, and so I was certainly drawn to the job in that way, but also, I think just being here, I've seen how all that has been reinforced. It's clearly an incredible community. Everyone's been so welcoming. And the orchestra plays great, and so it felt like a great opportunity to me, because I have a lot of ideas about what I want to do as a music director with an orchestra, and how an orchestra relates to a community, and so I think it felt like the perfect opportunity, given that it's right in the area of the country that I'm accustomed to living and that I love. And I currently work between Pittsburgh and Indianapolis, so I drive past Richmond every time I commute. And so it just felt like the right place.
And we were talking earlier, having a background in Michigan, you like the cold weather, you know the Midwest, and so this is a familiar territory to you.
Certainly. I've carved out this little triangle for myself between Ann Arbor, Michigan, Indy, and Pittsburgh, where I'm doing the majority of my work these days. And somehow growing up with the weather, I've gotten a little soft. I used to, as a kid in Michigan, I could wear t-shirts in 30-degree weather, and I don't have that anymore. But yeah, the cold doesn't faze me. If anything, it's the opposite. It's the heat. My first job was in Texas, and too much for me.
Well, I'm going to ask you about the rehearsal, because you've had a chance to get to know the musicians. But first, I want to know about your connection to music. How were you introduced to music? And what was kind of your first love?
Yeah, so I originally, when I was a kid, it's a funny story. My parents showed me this movie, or maybe it was just on TV one night or something, but I saw this documentary about a famous violinist named Isaac Stern, who he went to China right after the Cultural Revolution, and was one of the first Americans to be allowed to go, and he performed, and the documentary was about that. And at the time I was 2 years old, so I had no idea what was going on in this documentary, but I heard a lot of violin playing, and something about the violin playing I really loved hearing, and so I asked my parents if I could start violin, and I think to have a kid that wants to start a musical instrument is exciting as a parent, and I don't think they would have forced me to do it if I didn't want to, but I did, and so I got my first violin when I was 3, and I really did love it. There was something about classical music that clearly just hooked me from the beginning, and I still love it to this day. I wish I played more violin. You asked about my first love in music, and it was certainly the violin and kind of the violin repertoire, and now I don't play as much because I spend more time conducting and spend more time listening to the orchestral repertoire, but I always loved the violin, and it was my first real companion, and thousands and thousands of hours on the violin, and every time I go back, it's like an old friend. So. And
you started at the age of 3?
At the age of 3, yeah.
At the age of 3 with your first violin?
Yeah, a nice tiny one. It's called when you get older, you make your way up to a full-size violin, but I started on a 1/32 size violin, which was about this big, and made my way up to a 16th and an 1/8 and a 1/4, and so all the way from a tiny little kid to full size.
So then with that type of story and starting at such a young age, when you enter into a symphony as a conductor, then there's a natural connection because you know that each one of those musicians has a love for music as well and probably has a story that is unique unto them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's when you actually think about it's a kind of daunting, humbling prospect to be a conductor when you really sit down and think about the amount of knowledge that is in front of you when you get on a podium. I mean, basically everyone in the orchestra has done something like I did, where they've practiced for 10,000 hours and become an expert on their instrument. And so to have anything to say to those people at all, really requires you to be extremely prepared. You have to be confident in your musical ideas, but then you also really need to know as much as possible because there's so much expertise there. And it's something I find amazing about symphonic performance is that the level to which that expertise is kind of combined into this organism that can function without, as a conductor, in the performance, I don't actually say anything. And I can do a little thing with my hands and the entire ensemble can turn on a dime and no one has to say anything. And it's remarkable. I mean, it's, you think about a workplace, I don't know of a single workplace that has 70 people who there's no inefficiency and everyone is in complete lockstep. I mean, and so it's a remarkable thing, but it's also, it's humbling. But I think, like you said, it helps me certainly to have played the violin, especially because I played an orchestra growing up. And so I saw tons of conductors, learned what worked, what didn't work, what I liked, how a rehearsal should be paced. And so those were super valuable skills that I got from my playing days.
And obviously a big piece of that is the relationship between the conductor and the symphony, the orchestra.
Yeah.
So tell me about rehearsal. How did it go? And as you walked into your first encounter with the Richmond Symphony Orchestra?
I thought went really well. I mean, one thing that always makes your life easier as a conductor is if the orchestra is collegial and welcoming, and this orchestra certainly was. I mean, I felt it's not even so much about them being nice or which is always great, but it's, if they're interested and curious and want to make music and explore new ideas and things like that, it makes the job of a conductor enormously easier because you're not, rubbing up against granite. You really, there's a kind of collaboration that goes on that makes my life much easier. And so I felt that from the outset. And yeah, it was a delightful group to work with. And then I also think the other thing that you always want to see is improvement, and for it to get better. Ultimately, as a conductor, your sole responsibility, I think, is to take it from wherever it starts to as high a level as you can get it in the time that you have. And I felt that over the course of the rehearsal, we also really had a nice upward trajectory, and you never really know. It's like, it's like test driving a car. Like some cars just respond a little differently, and some feel better, some don't feel as good, and somehow this just felt very natural, and it was comfortable from the outset. And there's a period right at the beginning of rehearsal where they have to get used to my conducting technique. Everyone's is different, and I have to get used to their playing style and responsiveness time and all those things. But it felt like quite quickly we clicked, and so I loved it. It was a great first rehearsal, and a couple more.
You do have a couple more rehearsals coming up, but It is a great feeling. I know in my world, if I walk into a congregation as a preacher and I start to speak, you can tell immediately if that's a group of people that are used to listening.
Right.
And it sounds like you walked into a situation with the RSO where you know that collaboration is expected and that they're ready to work with you in putting together the very best performance, which is a gift.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think what you want is ultimately, I think most people enjoy being challenged, actually, and they want to, most musicians want to play in a setting where the artistic quality is really high and that the standards are high, and that you're trying to push for something better, and I think most people want that, but people's openness to that can often shift and change. And so if you go into a place where you feel like people just want to phone it in and collect a check and go home, then it's never as enjoyable or as meaningful as if people are really there and excited to be there and pushing for something greater. And I didn't feel that. I didn't feel the former with RSO at all. I felt entirely the latter, that people were really curious, excited to be there, and so nothing more you can ask for as a conductor.
Yeah, well, and for our musicians, their activity does not begin and end here on this stage. I mean, this stage is incredibly important, and all the individuals that will fill this house to hear the performance, incredibly important. But our mission's much larger, and so when you think about the Richmond Symphony Orchestra, what's your vision for the orchestra and for our engagement in the community? Inspiring that 3-year-old someplace to pick up a violin, to work in the schools, to be in the Wayne County area. You have a vision for that wider mission?
Yeah, I mean, I think you said it there. Being an orchestra that's really engaged very authentically and very accessibly in the community is vital. I think it's an incredible resource for a community like this to attract all of this incredible talent through a symphony orchestra. I mean, to be a professional in any symphony orchestra requires that person to have dedicated, as we talked about before, thousands of hours to a craft, and to be a real expert, and to know what it means to have discipline and work towards something and be passionate about something. And so to have those people just present in a community is a really incredible, valuable resource. But by itself, like you said, I mean, if they're just sitting on a stage and performing, I don't think it does so much. It's really important that, especially for an orchestra like this, that we get out there and talk to as many people in the community as we can about classical music, but also just about how an orchestra can play whatever role it might play for them in their lives. And so that starts with, certainly the high school, middle school, elementary school music programs. And like you said, starting from a very young age, if there's a 3-year-old in Richmond that's interested in music, we want the RSO to be a key part of their development, and them to benefit from the fact that there's a really great symphony orchestra right on their doorstep. But also, for the 45-year-old who just is coming into classical music for the first time and they never had a chance to be exposed, but now it's a new hobby for them, and everywhere in between. I think it's crucial to have an orchestra that's accessible, and that people feel like they take pride in it, but also that they know that it's a really incredible group of people that they're welcome to engage with, and that will be welcoming to them. So, I think my vision is for the RSO to be a place and an organization that everyone in Richmond and Wayne County takes pride in, and also that they feel like is theirs, and that they can engage with. No one is turned away or unwelcome, and it's like being in class. There are no stupid questions. There are no, anyone who's interested, that's fantastic, and we want everybody to be a part of this great project.
So this weekend you will get the broad continuum of folks coming, some that have a deep knowledge, season ticket holders, you'll have children, you'll have college students. They're going to be filling this hall expecting something, a great performance. What do you want them to, what are you going to have as far as the performance, and can share a little bit about what you're putting together?
So I think I find that fascinating. When you have an audience, this goes for a concert here, a concert in New York City, wherever you're performing, there's going to be people there who have never been to a classical concert before, and there are going to be people who have been to hundreds. And so how to make the experience an enjoyable, meaningful one for all of them, I think is really crucial. And I think, if there are ways that you can give people little nuggets or tools for how to potentially engage with a concert and give them a little bit of context or a little bit of reasoning as to why they might be hearing what they're hearing and what are some of the possible ways to listen, to access these pieces. I think that's a really important, powerful thing that helps people that have never been to a concert before and people who have been to many. So the program that we're doing this weekend, I hope, is designed in that way, because I think there's an overarching theme to the program of dance. All of the pieces that we're playing in some way are dance kind of inspired or related. I mean, the outer pieces, the big set of pieces on the second half that we're doing are Dvorak's Slavonic dances, and so it'll be a series of short Slavonic dances. They all have a little bit of a different character, but and then the first piece we're doing is called Danzon No. 2 by Marquez, who's a Mexican composer, and this is a Latin American dance. And I think, the theme of something like dance, I mean, everybody knows how to dance in some way, has tried it themselves. If you're like me and you're a terrible beginning dancer, that's your experience, and some people are expert dancers, but that's kind of an avenue into these pieces that I think might make them a little more tangible, a little more appreciable. And they're also actually just super fun. And so the Dvorak Slavonic dances I love because they're really festive, celebratory, short pieces that everyone enjoys, but they also have a lot of musical subtlety. There was no dearth of things to work on in rehearsal because there's so many details that if they're taken care of, really contribute to this nice, subtle end product. But I think that's crucial is to have repertoire, to have pieces, to have types of performances that people from every walk of life, every experience level can come and appreciate and get something out of, and that they don't feel like we've thrown them something that they can't handle or that is so foreign that. And I think hopefully this program is that for all of our audience members. I mean, there's something for everyone to listen to. It's a lot of great music, but it's also, I think, very accessible, and so I'd invite anyone I think it's a great program for someone who's never been to a concert before to come try out, because it'll actually, it might not be as intimidating as some others. And at the same time, if you're a music buff and you've been to hundreds of concerts, I can't think of, the Dvorak Slavonic dances are pieces that I listen to all the time and I never get sick of, and I listen to a fair amount of classical music, so it's even more challenging now to keep my attention. And so, I hope it's a program everyone will enjoy.
That's great.
Yeah.
Sounds like a great dance. And with dancing, you need partners.
For sure.
So you partnering with the musicians of the RSO and the performance partnering with those that come to be at the performance. So it'll be a dance, and you use the word fun, which I think with the RSO, always a good time.
Oh, yeah.
So Jacob, Joyce, thanks so much for being here and spending some time with me here on the stage at Civic Hall as we prepare for the performance this weekend. Appreciate this engagement in the interview, and I wish you all the best this weekend as we look forward to the performance of the RSO. So thanks.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to it too. I hope to see everyone there, and like you said, I think it'll be a fun time. So hopefully people will join us.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.